We're hopping in the old time machine and taking a trip all the way back to the 1980s in this episode of Little Big Thumbs. Growing up in my family, one of the most played games back in the 1980s and 90s was Personal Preference, and now that game is making a comeback. The original inventor of that game is sending it through Kickstarter to find a new audience and has created some new categories and cards to add into the mix. And they sent us a brand new copy of that 1987 classic party game, along with some prototypes of some of the new cards that will be included. So let's go take a look and find out what Personal Preference is all about. Personal Preference is all about ranking our favorite, and sometimes not so favorite things, and allowing other players to guess what those ranks will be, as we race to be the first to make it all the way around the board. There are 4 categories based on shapes, and each round will play with the category based on where the preferee is located on the board. If they're on one of the corner spaces, the preferee gets to choose their category. And there are even spots where one card from each category will be used. These cards are placed on the 4 quadrants in the center of the board, and then the preferee secretly chooses the order they like them from best to worst. Once the secret envelope is on the center of the board, everyone places their bets, either a regular guess on the outside of the quadrant or a strong bet in the middle. Once all bets are placed on the board, the preferee reveals their picks. If you guessed correctly with a regular guess, you'll move your pawn 1 space clockwise around the board. Strong bets that are correct will earn 2 spaces, but if one of those double bets is incorrect, that results in your pawn being moved backwards 1 space. In the original game, the goal was all about seeing who could get all the way around the board to the finish space. And in this new edition, well, that's actually still the case. Now, let's take a look at what is different about this new edition of Personal Preference, and then have a quick chat about how appropriate this game might be for households with young children. In the original edition of Personal Preference, there were just 4 categories of cards, and each of those categories was tied to one of the 4 shapes that we talked about earlier. Now, in the updated version, there are 5 core categories, with several potential expansion categories available, and those categories can be mixed and matched with the shapes to make unique combinations for a varied gameplay experience. Aside from the added variety, what I really like about this new system is that it opens the door for players to create their own decks of category cards and add those into the game box. Back in the old days, we would make cards based on our favorite pro wrestlers or maybe Transformers. And being able to fully embrace that homebrew approach to Personal Preference, it's kind of exciting. The new rules also include some minor variants for playing Personal Preference. And honestly, these are more of the common house rules I remember playing as a kid, like placing your bet tokens face down on the table to sort of reduce the groupthink and maybe up the chance to do some bluffing during the game, or not allowing players to make those double bets, those strong bets, until everybody has placed their initial bets down onto the table. While there's not any kind of revamped gameplay here, the simplicity of Personal Preference is what makes it so accessible for just about anyone. And the process of ranking and guessing those lists is always just inherently fun. Now let's briefly discuss how appropriate this game might be with younger children sitting at the table. The gameplay itself is easy to grasp. My younger daughter didn't always catch on to the consequence of going into that double bet in the middle of the table, but by and large, my kids were able to jump into the game without any difficulty at all. As for the new cards themselves, some parents and guardians may want to filter out some of these objects and experiences that are specifically relatable to adults. When the bottom falls out of your grocery bag, or reverse mortgages. I mean, these are things that we can talk about as a family, but it's not something that kids have any kind of emotional response to. And for them, with those cards, that makes the game a little bit boring for them. The locations category was the most fun for us, because we could really talk about and then research what each of these places might offer us for future family vacations. As I said earlier, the real bright spot with this new edition of Personal Preference is that possibility to make new decks of cards. My kids jumped right into coming up with lists of card ideas and creating their own cards, complete with adorable illustrations. For that reason, Personal Preference is a game that we'll be able to come back to over and over again, and it's got that mature content that my kids might want to grow into over time. But right out of the box, Personal Preference is a game that's probably best suited to teenagers through to adults. So that's it. That's our look at Personal Preference. If you're looking for a game that is going to get people talking, if you're looking for a game that is easy to learn, if you're looking for a party-style game that is accessible for almost any age, Personal Preference is a great option with a real retro feel. Make sure to check out the links in the description of this video to find the Kickstarter campaign, which may or may not be running at the time you watch this video, as well as the Personal Preference website, which most certainly will be running at the time you watch this video. Thank you for watching, and until next time, whether you've got little players or big players, make sure that you keep playing games that make your thumbs go way up. Bye for now.